I'm Paul Brest. I have been a faculty member at Stanford for a long time and left in the year 2000 to become president of the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. I came back in 2012 and am teaching at the law school, in the business school, and I'm also one of the co-directors of the Philanthropy and Civil Society program, PACS, at Stanford. So take, for example, suppose a philanthropist is concerned with malaria, which kills hundreds of thousands of people in the global south. An intervention that is where you can see tangible results would be to provide them with bed nets, which they use at night in order to protect against mosquitoes. In fact, the better bed nets are insecticide treated. And that philanthropist might provide grants to an organization that distributes the bed nets. It might invest in a company. There's at least one entity that manufactures bed nets, might make a concessionary investment. That is where the philanthropist doesn't expect a full return, but expects some return in order to manufacture the bed nets. So that's an immediate way of solving the problem. One might also think that trying to reduce the populations of mosquitoes through insecticides or through draining swamps, standing water is a good technique. That's a little bit more remote from the immediate beneficiary, but it can also be extremely effective. And then at the highest risk level, the philanthropist might join with others in supporting the development of a vaccine. And that, of course, has the potential, if successful, to reduce the disease in millions of people, the potential possibly to wipe out the disease over time. But that's the highest risk, right? It's abstract. You're not working with people on the ground living in huts in Africa or India. You're supporting scientists in white coats somewhere. And whereas in the first strategy, each bed net you provide is going to, if used properly, protect somebody against malaria, you may invest millions and millions of dollars in a vaccine and never achieve the outcome you expect. So it takes, for the vaccine intervention, it takes a philanthropist who is willing to look forward in a big way, and not necessarily to achieve big gains, but who recognizes kind of an expected value way of looking at the issue, that the value of that intervention ex ante is extremely high, maybe even higher than bed nets. So that's one example. Let me take another one involving climate change. So suppose you're concerned with the devastating effects that climate change is going to have or could have on the world. Again, at the most immediate intervention, you might support efforts at adaptation, efforts by particular localities to adapt to the global warming that's inevitably going to come to some extent. And that might have to do with creating crops that are going to be able to handle higher temperatures, or trying to protect low-lying areas against the incursion of a rising sea level. So that's immediate, it's tangible, you can see if it's happening. Or at the other extreme, you might take the strategy that the Hewlett Foundation and several others have pursued, which is trying to mitigate climate change by advocating for public policies that will then push governments and industry and others to reduce CO2 emissions. That's much more abstract. You're doing policy work in legislatures. You're trying to change something that is not local because CO2 is invisible and global. It's a long-term, high-risk strategy. But those who engage in it believe that it is not necessarily a better strategy than adaptation, but it's a necessary one as well. Or you might think that technology provides potential solutions to solving the climate change problem in the form of alternative sources of energy like wind and solar, or even things like fusion in the long term. In which case you would make investments in companies that manufacture this technology. The chances are those investments are going to be higher risk, that they're going to have longer periods before you expect any return than what even angel investors would normally do. But it's the kind of way that a philanthropically inclined investor could make a difference. So I think for an individual philanthropist, the first thing to realize is you're not in this alone. That is, if you're not going to solve the vaccine problem, you're not going to solve any aspect of the climate change problem yourself, but your funds joined with other people's funds can make the difference. I also think that individual philanthropists like foundations may want to have a mixture of risks in their portfolio. You may want some really tangible outcomes, supporting a school where you can see disadvantaged kids doing better next year than they did this year, or supporting bed nets where you can identify, even if you don't see them, you can identify that there are individuals benefiting. But you may want to mix that, and I hope you do mix that with some higher risk strategies, because it takes either foundations or persons of considerable net worth in order to make risky strategies. I think the number of people who are coming into philanthropy with a real interest in outcomes is increasing, although I'd like to see it increase much more rapidly. To put it in terms that Arrillaga uses, I think there's a movement from philanthropy 1.0 to 2.0. And my hope is that with this class, students who take it and their peers will move to 3.0.